My name is Michael Leiblein. I am the Assistant Program Chair for the STR Division. And my role today is simply to introduce everyone to our distinguished scholar, Torben Pedersen, and then moderate this discussion. And I will speak as little as possible. My role as facilitator here is to remind everyone to enter questions in the chat thread. And then I will call on some of those folks later as we move on to ask some of their questions directly of Torben. And I'm sure we'll have a good fluid, I'm sure Torben's fine with a good fluid open discussion. What I will only do is two things. I will start off by introducing Professor Pedersen, and I aim to do that with not that slide, but this slide. So many people here are probably aware of Torben's tremendous accomplishments. He's a professor at Bocconi. He's a professor at Copenhagen Business School. I understand he's visited at more places and had visiting professorships at more places than I can name or list on a single slide. He is also, for the international strategy community, a co-founder of the Global Strategy Journal. Several awards, recognitions from basically every major society, the AIB, the SMS, the European Institute of International Business, Academy of International Business Best Paper Awards. I don't know about this, Torben. I looked on Google Scholar last weekend, and I had something like 300 listings on Google Scholar, which sort of stunned me. Maybe it didn't stun me. I didn't mean that in any way, but I was like, oh my God, I feel so inadequate. But he's published in the AMJ, the Global Strategy Journal, the Journal of International Business Studies, Org Science, Journal of Management Studies, SMJ, an H index of 59, coming in on 20,000 citations, and all sorts of contributions to globalization and offshoring and knowledge management in the multinational. So I will ask you all for 1 second to take off your microphones or turn off mute. And if you agree with me and so I'm seeing, okay, there's a couple of people. Knock on wood. Thank you for Torben Pedersen for spending your time with us today.
Thank you.
Okay. So what I will do is—
Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you. So thank you for your time. So what I thought I would do is I'll kick off some questions. And again, we can, put in the chat thread if you have other things that you'd like to talk to Torben about. Our intent here is just an open-ended discussion about his career, some successes, some lessons, basically trying to build the community up in ways that we normally would have if we were in Vancouver. So Torben, I guess the first question for just about anybody is why are you in this strange career of being an international business, international strategy professor?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for your very nice introduction, and thanks to all of you for taking time to have this discussion here today. So your question about why am I a scholar today, so to say. So I would say, for me, strangely enough, it has been very much an emerging strategy. If we use Mintzberg's things, it's unlike what I see with my own kids and many young people that make more strategic choices about and maybe is forced to that to a large extent. For me, I would say it has very much been emerging strategies, in the sense that I have never been sitting down and saying, now I want to be academics when I grow up, or I want to go this way. So for me, it has been very much been that there has been different opportunities that has opened up for me, and I have pursued these opportunities, and then you can say one opportunity has taken the others, and it has developed like that. Of course, I think I have liked it. It has been a fun journey and things like that. So I have just continued to be more and more involved, you can say, as opportunities has arisen. So I think it has it's very much has been an emerging strategy on my side.
Did you? So I do not know this. I mean, I think we've known each other for maybe coming on a decade or 7 years or something like that. But what did you do before the doctoral program?
Yeah, so what is actually a little bit more is that I was actually spending quite a lot of time before I started my master education. So I was working as a taxi driver, truck driver, construction worker, and actually my first education, you might say usable education, was as installation worker. So I worked in the construction industry and things like that. So I was spending quite a lot of time before starting my master education. You can say working, you can say ordinary jobs and things like that. And I think I of course learned a little bit about how things are organized in life and got another perspective on life. But then of course you can say, and sometimes I say when I joke a little bit, because I have an education there, I say, if I fail in academia, I have an exit option there. To go back to the construction industry as installation worker. Having said that, I have not exercised that option so far.
Well, that's fun. It's actually, I don't think you would know this, but I mean, that was, for me, college was doing a lot of moving in Manhattan and and then my first job was working with these union electricians. And I was telling somebody this story last week of, I was an electrical engineer coming out of school, and he's like, oh, I could do these proportional integral derivative controllers and do all the math for them. And this electrician came up to me and here's a circuit board, fix it. And I'm like, I have no idea what to do, but oh well. So how early research, so your PhD was at CBS, Copenhagen Business School. How did you, I think a lot of the folks who are coming into our STR video series are oftentimes junior scholars or even PhD students. How did the dissertation question come about for you? I mean, how did you, where did the research question come from? How did you narrow it down? How did you frame the problem? Can you offer anything about that, those types of questions and issues?
So you can say I have, in my research, I have often since the very beginning tried to get inspiration from you can say some phenomenons out there. You can say I'm not driven by theoretical questions and things like that. So for me, it's very much about understanding different phenomenons and of course apply theories in order to understand different phenomenons. And also for my thesis, it was very much at that point in time. I have to say that is some years ago. I finished my thesis and my PhD thesis, and at that point in time, one of the hot topics in Denmark at that point was multinational corporations' behavior in Denmark. So that's why it was discussed a lot in the business press and things like that. So I got my topic from that discussion, so to say. And that also explains why you can say I have had I'm coming very much out of the international business stream of research, you can say.
Yeah, that does seem to be, and is that, do you see similar sort of interaction now that you've traveled quite a bit with all these visiting professorships and the current position at Bocconi? Do you see similar interactions between the business community and the university as you saw at CBS, and I guess you continue to see at CBS?
I think it varies. It varies from how it's organized, of course, and different universities has different connections, different positions in the business life in the different countries. You can say Copenhagen Business School, for example, is second to none in Denmark. So they have good connections to Danish business, but of course to Danish business and Bocconi, of course, is also very well reputed in Italy. But Bocconi is organized so there's a business school called STR, and then there's a business university, and at Bocconi it's more the business school, the STR, that has the contacts to the companies. And I think so not so much the business university where I am actually. These two are connected, but also they're connected by ownership, but you can say relatively separate in the way they are run. So of course Bocconi in particular STR has a lot of business contacts as well there.
Interesting. Yeah. I knew that. I knew some of that. Not all. That's see how that evolves is interesting. And certainly in the U.S. it's also different than what I think I perceive in some of the European schools, the way the business schools interact with the community. I don't know if maybe others have different observations we can share and talk about later. As you've moved on from and your career started taking off, I assume you started having more proposals for research than you could conceivably complete. So could you tell us something about how your research interests have evolved, or even the criteria you've used to select and reject where you'd allocate some of your effort?
Yeah, you can say I'm over the years I have developed a broad portfolio of research. So some researchers are very focused and more narrow and really deep in what they're doing, and they prefer to do that. I'm the type that like to have many balls up in the air. So I'm also broad in terms of my research and things like that. And you're right, of course, over the years, you get different opportunities. You can go different ways. You have to make choices about which project you want to pursue and which project which project not. So you can say, and I think I probably tend to say, as many others tend to say, yes to too many things, so you get overburdened with work. But I think when I say no, I think it's because it's not fun, and I cannot see I can develop a contribution here. You can say I often start on projects and then at least go a little bit of the way to see, is it fun, and is it something that can develop where I can make a contribution? Is there something new here? And then of course, so it's a little bit like you might say, like portfolio investment. You try different things out, which also means that you spend a little bit of time on things, and then maybe you have to leave it again because you can see it's going nowhere. Or you can also use the picture of a state gate model, that you start to invest a little bit in the project, and then you see whether it's with there's beef on it, and then you go on and things like that. So but you need to clearly, if it's not fun, or I cannot see there's contribution in anymore, then of course it's about you have to kill the project, because it's just killing your time instead.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, so nobody would know this. Torben and I actually have a little working paper going on. When he started his response saying he said yes to too many things, I was concerned. As far as I know, he hasn't killed the project yet, so I haven't bored him too much, at least at present. So that's good to hear. So just as a reminder, everyone, I'm monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, please feel free to type those in the chat so we know what's coming up ahead of time. And you can do that either privately to me and I will call on you, or you can do that to the group. I have no preference. And also at the end, we'll probably be trying to take a little screenshot at the end of all the people who were part of this conversation for the STR division. So if you don't mind, I know I have a face for radio, but if you do not, turn on your video and we'll take a screenshot of you as well. So I am really curious about the research evolution. To me, it's been interesting to sit back and say, how do I think about where you contribute? How do you start thinking about these portfolios, dimensionalizing them in terms of theory and phenomena and methods? And I think that's oftentimes come up with the consortia types of events that several of us have been involved with. Maybe a follow-on to that is, I assume you have a big voice. If somebody on this call wants to interview at Bocconi or CBS, what's the kind of things that, similar to projects that would excite you or your colleagues and say, this is a junior person worth exploring interaction with?
Yeah, so of course you're right. Both Bocconi and CBS is quite active in recruiting, and of course both at the academy and invited juniors for job talks and things like that. I think of course it's not that there's any formalized criteria, but as you say, what is it that of course I think you're interested in scholars that of course know the art of doing research and also have interesting problems that fit with some of the faculty of the universities or the departments, so you can get so you can actually build up a group and things like that. So I think that's I think that's the overall criteria, of course, and then of course then more specific, you have to experience the candidates and see how they're presenting and how passionate they are about their own research and things like that. I would say one thing you can say, you would like to see the fire in the eyes, so to say. You would like to see they are really passionate. So like entrepreneurs, they really have the fire in the eyes. I think that feels good when you can see that with a young scholar there.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That is the passion for the topic, the fire in the eyes. That's an interesting observation. It's always interesting to me to think about this. What leads us to select individuals, and you're interviewing at a school, and particularly when you're new to the field, it's sort of often you don't really know what an individual school is looking for. But I think everybody's looking for passion and energy. We talk about things like fit and complementarity, and what does that really mean? It's an interesting conversation, and I think that's always useful for us to have.
Yeah, so I think that what is important is that you're yourself, and you should not try to speculate too much on what others want. At the end of the day, if we can see you have the fire in the eyes and that really have something to say, and your stuff, your problem, your data, the research, and you have this passions, then of course there will always be complementarities and things like that. So I think it's very much so while young scholars might speculate too much on what others want, I think it's as much trying to say what is it that really you want yourself, and try to come out with that.
Wow, that's I can't agree more. That I haven't heard that said so well. I mean, I think that's I do see that as well. People really thinking about, well, what do you want? That's not the issue. It's what's in your heart that I think is super important. Are there other lessons, just maybe bringing this out to, as we engage and broaden our conversation, are there other lessons you've learned in your career? I mean, everybody wants to always talk about their triumphs, but triumphs are challenges. And hey, after being in this field for 10 years, what things you've learned might be that you're willing to share might be useful for the group.
One thing I use to describe our job is a little bit management of guilt. So what I mean by that is that we always feel guilt. We can read more papers. We can spend more time with our co-authors. We can spend more time with our kids, our partners, and our students, and things like that. So we are in a business where we have we live with guilt in the sense. We're not the only one. There's many other jobs where you have you can say that, but so you need to be able to manage this guilt and not be and actually be happy with what you manage to do in the time you have, instead of trying to feel bad about the things you're not able to make, because there's a lot of things you will never be able to make, because we have all stacks of papers and things we would like to read and do and things like that we fool ourselves and say we will be able to do it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but that tomorrow never comes, and so we live with this guilt. So I think that is also something you have to relax with the guilt. It is, our business has to do with management of guilt also. I think that I have learned and is more happy with now much more happy with what I actually managed to do, instead of focusing so much on all the things I never managed to do, so to say.
And I appreciate that very much. I mean, I struggle with, I keep downloading, I need to read this, and then I have a library of 500 files to review, and then nothing's happening, right? So you have to find a way to prioritize. I see Katharina's laughing at that as well. So I'm glad I got somebody to react. So, okay, well, that's actually useful. That's, I think, super useful. Do you have ways or tips of how you help me? How do I manage my guilt?
Yeah, but when I say management of guilt, I think the point is also accept it to some extent, because that's the nature of what we're doing. So of course it's about managing your time in the best ways, and what I try to do is to, of course, I think everybody do that. It's not a sophisticated system. It's just about writing lists about what I will do to this day. Some people call it stress list, or list what I will do this week and things like that. So it's not a particular complicated or things like that. But I try to do that. And again, of course, I'm never able to do everything I have on my list. But that's the guilt again.
Yeah, well, that actually helps me. It reminds me, I sat in a talk with Don Hambrick years ago, and what you're telling me is, don't be guilty about the guilt, Michael. And I hope that's what everybody's hearing. And I remember hearing, Don was, don't get bitter. And I was, maybe 6 years out of the PhD, and I was getting bitter about various things. And he basically, and it was interesting to hear somebody like, you or Don, hey, don't be bitter. Think about you can think about the cluster of people in your camp that, you can work with and support, build a support group. And I think that's all great. It's basic, but it's important to hear. So I'm still looking in the chat room. Type in your questions, please. So I don't have many interesting things to say, but I know this group does, or I assume this group does. But this is one thing I think that's interesting. Maybe this is my pet peeve, but I start thinking about the field of management, the field of strategic management, the field of international business, or fields of all those fields. And I think, at times I think we're losing track of what's our distinctive competence. So as you think about, your research in strategy and international strategy and outsourcing and offshoring and whatnot, what do you think are some of the major issues? Well, and I shouldn't even narrow this. Why frame the problem about research? What do you think are some of the major issues facing business scholars today?
Yeah. So I think a little bit, as also your project is about. I think strategy in general is stalled a little bit when it comes to theoretical development. So you can say some of the last theoretical contribution is this resource-based theory, and we can even talk about to what extent is that a theory and things like that. And since then we have seen almost nothing real theoretical development in strategy. So I think on the theoretical side we are stalled to a very large extent, and I understand that's also a little bit the project you are trying to pursue. I think on the theoretical side, the problem for me is, I think, is a little bit that we formulated too much in organizational concepts that is defined by other organizational concepts and things like that, while we have not anchored well enough on individual level among individuals, because you can say at the end of the day it's individuals that are carriers of the strategy and things like that. It's not the organization, it's not the walls, the tables, and whatever we have in the companies, the machines that are carriers of the strategy and all these things. It's individuals that are carriers of the strategy, and therefore I think in order to really move forward, I think we have to anchor it on more with how individuals are actually perceiving all these things and reacting to it in order to move further. That's that's very much the micro foundation agenda on the theoretical side. So I think that's my take on it. I think that is needed there. But then, having said that, there's a lot of interesting empirical phenomenon still. Where of course right now, as it's played out with the pandemic, you can say that raises a lot of new questions about where you can say a disruption, for example, of the, you can say of this about the global value chains that are broken, and we have done super specialized global value chains with one spot serve suppliers around the world, and then become super vulnerable when more than 50% of all the face masks in the world is produced in China and things like that. So it raises the whole question of the, for example, about whether our global value chains are too specialized. You might say efficiency versus resilience in our global value chains. So that's one issue. And of course, the whole technology development, digitalization, additive manufacturing and things like that. So, and also politically, this about deglobalization is another issue. So I think there's a lot of new interesting empirical phenomenon that are interesting to study here in strategy and international business, so to say. But theoretically, I would say to some extent we are stalled as far as I can see.
Wow. I mean, so raise your hand if you're a PhD student on this call, because I think I just heard 5 PhD theses outlined. So I am not surprised to hear the micro foundations agenda, but I'm also, I still, every time I think about micro foundations, and I thought about that a little bit, I recall a talk I went to, a small group of 10 or 15 folks. Sid Winter came in and gave, his routine shtick, and, the attack on, he had a colorful phrase that I will not repeat about micro foundations, but, that was, sort of interesting. And then the empirical phenomenon, I think I just heard, all sorts of topical issues, disruption, global value chains, some of the political issues. A plug for my little startup journal, David Teese just wrote an interesting article on how we need to, our theory development has been stalled around things like Porter's 5 Forces, national innovation systems, and whatnot, but those are all based on assumptions of a post-World War II economic world, and we probably need to think about how to update those theories in the face of some of the changes, political changes we're seeing globally. So lots of things here, and it really resonated with me. And that has actually spurred all sorts of questions that are coming through the chat. So let me take a couple of those. One is, the first one to come through was from Katarina, STR division.
Yeah, so I can see it also. So
yeah, Katarina, do you want to restate it in your own words, and then we'll.
So one thing that I'm doubting, I'm super young, but mid-career, And one thing that I am sometimes wondering is how one should balance in the development of the career, not from a personal perspective, the benefits of developing international collaborations by passing periods or even relocating to other institutions versus developing a more embedded, a rooted localization in just one institution. So let's say if you want depth versus breadth, how do you balance this tension?
I would say again, I don't think there's one right model with so many other things here. There's many different ways of doing it. I would not say pretend in any way that my way of doing things are better than many other ways of doing things. Also a little bit about this doing broad versus doing more narrow research and things like that. There's so many different ways of doing it. I of course, and I understand your question in the sense, I'm actually, you can say, affiliated with 3 universities, also including CBS. I'm also affiliated with Carr's Business School in London. So of course, the point is that I have most of my business contacts and my really contacts is in Denmark still. So I have actually, I have organized it a little bit. So you can say I do different things at Bocconi, which is my main affiliation and where I do my teaching. And this is also my research anchor, so to say. It's a very strong department. There are many fantastic researchers. So I do my research mainly there, while I try to keep my business contacts and my links to business in Denmark, because it's so difficult to build those up. You do that over many years, build some kind of trust. So you get insights and maybe even data from the companies. So I have one main location, which is Bocconi, and then I try to keep also in touch with the other locations. And of course, here in this case, it's Milan, Copenhagen, London, so they are not far away from each other. You could not do it if you were talking about US versus Europe. I think they're all within 2 hours flight from each other.
Thank you, Torben.
Yeah, when you figure that out, Katarina, please tell me. So Xiao, you had I think a very open question that is probably of interest to many people here. You want to give some color on the advice for authors question?
Sure. Thanks, Torben. This is great. And I'm just wondering, with your vast editorial experience, especially as a founding editor at JSJ, what are the advice you have for authors? In particular, what are some of the things that you wish all authors would know and try and avoid in terms of mistakes?
Yeah. So of course there's a number of things you can say. There's a number of things you can say here, because but I think maybe the main thing I would say is that the way I look at journals is very much like a wall, like where we're putting another piece on top of the wall. So it's a little bit there's Pink Floyd has this song The Wall. And so what we do on research, there's a lot of research out there on all kind of topics, and you can say, as researchers, our purpose is to build more and more knowledge on. So we put every of us put another piece on top of the wall, so to say. So journals are just you can say a means of creating this wall, in the sense journals are the media for publishing our research. So what you have to do is that you have to understand the wall. You really have to to understand the conversation and things like that, and where you can make a contribution, meaning where you can put another break on the wall. So you have to relate to the existing research and then add to it. You can say, if you, for example, start a paper by saying, nobody has done research on this. this is the worst opening you can have, in the sense that it means that you have not, there's no research where nothing has been done. And it means that you ignore what has already been done, and you distance yourself from the existing literature. The right way of starting every paper is saying, existing literature have said this, and I can add this point to existing literature. So I think it's very much on understanding this mindset that we are collectively, we are building this wall, and we are and we're adding to it. So I think it's the main mistake is if you distance yourself from the existing knowledge and are not making a contribution to it. It's a very general answer, you can say, but I think it's very much this mindset you need to have to be able to contribute.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hear this humility, as well as, I need to have an appreciation for the space. I need to have some humility about what I do and do not know. And I need to have some confidence about what I do and do not know. And maybe that helps us build. I love the Floyd reference. I'm an ELO fan, by the way, but that's something else. I see a question from, is Gerardus or Gerard? If you're still with us?
I am, yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I picked up on the bit about looking at the individual and looking at micro foundations, and a lot of the research I do and also some of the other contributions I make are about exactly looking at that aspect. But what I've also found as sort of an early career scholar, that it's also like a difficult thing to do, because if you really want to take it seriously, there's different theory, there's different methods that you're using, and if you're doing that, you're doing two things differently than most people in the field, which is obviously like a risky strategy. So how do you balance that? How do you sort of not sort of get yourself in a bind where you're trying to do something that's very valuable doing, but it's also hard to get traction with and hard to get published, especially if you're not like an established scholar.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something very relevant here, in the sense that, as you say, it is very much about a balance between, of course, being being different and coming up with something, but it should not be too different, because then becomes also more risky, as you say, and things like that. So I think it's you're right about that. It's about finding this balance, and you're probably also right that it's even more risky for young scholars to pursue this new ideas of research. And in that sense, it's probably my advice is probably to be a little bit more on the safe side when you are a young scholar, and that's another thing you can say. We have a long life for us as scholars, so we are not expressing all we want to say in one paper or in one thesis, so to say. We have there will be subsequently there will be many other papers where we can say what we want to say. But to your answer, I think you're right that it can be very risky to be the one to be a young scholar that try to lead a little bit the theoretical development on some of these issues. So, but my advice to you would be to find a balance that you are comfortable with and that is still interesting for you.
Yeah, I'll just I don't know. I mean, maybe others can pipe in on this. I do think it's an important question. I think that the really nice part of the question is, you know, oftentimes the advice, so it is an issue of incremental versus more or less incremental progress in the field. I think there is this wonderful question about, you know, incrementally, we suggest, oh, manipulate one assumption in the model. And that's probably the easiest thing to do. So sometimes when you take a more aggressive stance into a new theory or phenomenon, I think for some of the theories, it's particularly difficult. And that's, I think, what's happening with the micro foundations agenda. But being very specific about what has and has not been said, and then being as specific as possible about what you're relaxing, I think might be good advice. And that's what, I mean, I am still, you know, I think it's hard to argue against the micro foundations agenda on several directions, but there have been critiques. That's what the reference of Sid Winter, and sort of, there was a reason he and Nelson were focused on routines. I think he has a paper in 2012 or so, Sid does. You know, I think that always was helpful for me to crystallize what the contribution of the micro foundations agenda was, and then look for methods that allow us to isolate that. That's a wonderful question. Maybe others can pick up on that later on in the chat. In the interim, I did see Jing Tang has a question for Torben. He was asking about just general suggestions for PhD students. I'll ask him to sort of expand on that, and maybe also think about junior faculty as well as PhD students.
But my advice here will be, or suggestions will be, you can say a little bit the same. That try to find your unique, your own uniqueness, so to say. You can say for me, becoming a researcher is a little bit like it's not art, but it has some of the same elements as art, in the sense that what young artists do is that they actually copy their masters. If you want to be a painter, you start to paint the same thing as your masters, try to copy them, and then you can say, and then you get into it, and then at some point in time you find your own impression, your own expression, so to say, your own style and things like that. And I think it's the same here with young scholars. Of course, you work with your supervisors, and you try to read what others have done and things like that. But as you develop more and more, you find your own topic, your own style, your own data, your own way of making a contribution to research, so to say. So I think that's, and of course that's what I try to help my PhD students to do, and also junior scholars, as you say. So I think that's my more general advice, so to say.
And Jing, is that getting to your questions, or are there other, maybe if anybody has other specific you know, elements of how to spur that development, or if you are a student or junior scholar and you're thinking about interactions with your committee or faculty that you'd like to raise, does anybody want to comment on that? Okay. I'm getting a thanks, so I think we're okay. We did get Professor Aguilera sent an email, well, a private chat, just getting out to work-life balance issues that I think are relevant to several people on the chat, and maybe also more of us as we're sequestered in our homes, in the US at least right now. Comments on how you manage your life?
So how I manage my life, of course, I think I have the same bad habits as many other in this industry, that I work too much. At least that's what the people around me tells me. And that's of course because I like my work, but I have to say there's of course I try to force myself to do other things as well, in the sense that that of course I have different hobbies, I like cooking, I like dancing, and I do fitness and things like that. So I think it's again, I don't think there's one solution to this. I think it's an individual thing again, that you have to find the balance that works for you, and things like that. So I can see Wood is happy about this.
Well, I think I think we all struggle with this this issue. So let me see. I got another question from Olga. So maybe Olga, could you share that with the group?
Yes, thank you very much. So my question is about building research identity, and what is in this sense, I mean, our research pipeline and also connection with others, because for me it's all the components of research identity. I'm at the stage when I already have my dissertation proposal defended, so I have these 3 articles that I'm working on, but at the same time I think, okay, what I'm gonna do after my dissertation is ready, because I'm interested in lots of things, but I'm a bit afraid of doing too many things, 2 different fields, trying to connect to researchers from the different fields, and in the end losing my identity. So I cannot in the end build stable connections with anyone, and people cannot really say who I am, what I'm actually doing. So what would be your advice here?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, and there's a number of things. I think it's right as I would probably, if as a young scholar, I would probably focus a little bit on some related projects, at least for some time. Because as you say, if you do too many things, your profile becomes too blurred. Of course, over the years, since we are in academia, at least some of us for many decades, you are able to do many different projects over the decades. And of course, that's also another thing you should have in mind, that all your points and all the things you want to do, you don't need to do in the beginning of your career. There will be time and opportunities later on also. So I would probably focus on some related projects, so you have some kind of profile in the beginning. It's also much easier in the job market instead of if it's too scattered, as you say. And then keep the other good ideas, put them in a drawer, and then when you have more time later on, look at it, take it back from the drawers, and as I say, there will be time later on also. I don't know whether that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, for me, it's also difficult. The difficult question is how to select the right pipeline or the right direction. Because my dissertation topic is quite narrow, how to make it a little bit broader, but still don't lose this identity in this sense.
Yeah, but I think it's actually you again. It's you. It's what you think is interesting, and where you have the fire in the eyes, where you really can see you can make a contribution. I don't think there's any objective criteria for how you select that. I think it's at the end of the day, research is about doing something unique, so writing something that nobody has written before. So where can you make that contribution? I think you're the best one yourself to make that decision. but I think you have to do it. You have to make that decision in the sense that not to get too blurred a profile in the beginning, at least. I would say over the years I have done many different things. So if I look at back, I have many areas where I've done research, but I have typically been sticking to some themes at different points in time. So it's there's a little bit of consistency at least.
Yeah, I remember when I went up for tenure, one of my probably the biggest voice in the room. You know, I remember writing up my document, and well, maybe I'll get more precise than I was going to. But I wrote up my document about my research is, you know, a lot of strategy work is about firm scope and its implications for competitive advantage. So I'd written up as sort of exogenous conditions affect strategic decisions, affect performance or advantage. And the senior person in my group at the time was Jay Barney, and he's like, no, and he ripped it up and he made me rewrite it all about theory. But the important point was there was a red thread. And I think that's what I'm, you know, I mean, Torben, your work for, you know, the years had a very clear red thread about global scope, outsourcing, offshoring, knowledge management, and the multinational. A lot of things that you had shared earlier about this experience with these Danish companies when you were doing your dissertation. And so I guess I will volunteer my 2 cents to Olga, just thinking about what that red thread is, and it's going to change over time. You're never going to do the best work. You know, it's not reasonable to expect the best work is going to come out of your dissertation. I will use this. Olga was building on the previous discussion, and as much as I agree with Torben's comment personally that it's got to be what's in the fire in your belly or in your eyes, what you care about. So much of your work has been, Torben, has been on outsourcing, offshoring, knowledge management, the multinational. I think we have a bunch of international strategy scholars on the call here. You know, what do you think are some of the most important unanswered questions in that area right now? Maybe what are the things in your file drawer that some of these folks might build on?
Yeah, you can say international business is, of course, is very much driven by phenomenon, and I think some of the phenomena I mentioned before, you can say that the whole pandemic, that were the disruption of you can say global value chains, the disruption of the global system of trade, you can say. So it actually has raised a number of questions. You can say, while you can say the way we have organized you can say global trade and global value chains before has very much about being efficiency, cost, and things like that. We have so to say known that there was also risk involved, but we have you can more or less ignore these risks. So it has all been in the name of efficiency. We have organized, and of course companies have done that. They organize their global value chain very much so. So you have taken advantage of the efficiency of placing different activities in different locations. So you have manufacturing in China, you might have software in Bangalore, and so forth. Now, of course, this pandemic, for example, is raising a lot of questions. We have regulation coming in. We have disruption, and there's other events. We also had a case with Fukushima in Japan, that actually was because there was some supplies to the auto industry. So the whole auto industry was blocked for some time because of that. And there was something in Thailand about a flood, a river that was flooding and things like that. So we see more and more cases where you can say natural disasters are affecting the way the very vulnerable systems of global value chains we have. So I think that raises a lot of new questions. And then there's also the whole technology, you can say. But Of course, you can say digitalization, technologies is also changing quite a lot here, and that has actually not been in IB, for example. There's relatively little about how additive manufacturing, robots, 3D printing, and all these things, how that actually affects, again, how we organize activities globally and things like that. And then you can add the whole political sentiments that are changing and things like that with more inward-looking type of policies around the globe, you can say. So I think there's a number of changing happening, quite dramatic changes happening there, new phenomenon that open up for new avenues for studies, I would say. We have many natural experiments, if you want to put it like that, that is happening now.
May you live in interesting times is, I think, the... So I wonder, other questions from the group, of course, just to, I repeat myself, but I just want to make sure everybody has opportunity to raise whatever questions they might have for Torben. I will move beyond sort of the academic and just, I heard a little bit about hobbies and passions outside, but, is there a favorite book or a favorite genre, insight into the man behind the academic articles?
That's actually one of the things where I have my guilt, you can say, in the sense that that's one of the things I have not been able, or I have not given priority. I have not been writing novels for many years because I read so much articles. So my wife, I should say, she's librarian, so we have a little bit of division of labor. So she do all the novels, and I do the boring stuff, you can say. I do the more academic stuff.
Well, maybe that's the case. I still, on food, the best meal I've ever had might have been with you in Denmark at the Keen. But there's some things, and there's some passions outside of academia, I'm sure, as well. Anything else from the group about research, teaching, early career? Ruth asked her question and left the group, so I think she dodged us. That's a little interesting, but I can see that.
Yeah.
So okay. So let's see what else we can do. I'll try to delay a few more seconds. We do have something. So Gerardus has a question on global value chains. Maybe he can add that to the group, and then we'll see where we are. Gerardus, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, sure. I've just recently gotten interested in this, and then I also noticed the blog on the SMS platform about this matter. And the one thing that I've been struggling a bit with, as somebody more new to this area with an interest in it, is where do I get data on how global value chains look like? How are they configured? Which companies are connected with which companies in these global value chains? Just obviously realizing that sort of some of the databases we normally rely on for company data are at the node level and not at the diet level. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, and what suggestions you have for somebody trying to make sense of this area and trying to find some inroads. And thanks for that.
Yeah. Another good question, and you're right. A lot of what we see on global value chains are, you can say, more single studies of global value chains, cases of global value chain, because of course there's no database we know about that has mapped that is mapping firms' global value chain, so to say, or all firms. So it's very much that you can say researchers have been in and looking at what, for example, is the value chain in an industry, or a value chain for a company like Apple or whatever company we look at. So it's not that I can give you advice, unfortunately, on databases that systematically map the value chains of companies. But I would say OECD, for example, is focusing quite a lot on this with global value chain. So they're making a number of reports, and they, for example, have been mapping the value chains for many of these COVID-19 products we talk about, because face mask, ventilators, test equipment, and things like that. So OECD has done a number of reports where they have outlined these value chains, so to say. But these are, again, you might say, cases more than it's mapping the value chains of across industries, so to say.
Who is doing that? Torben, can you just repeat that? Who's mapping out the...
OECD, the organization of economic,
yeah.
What is it called?
Yeah, Organization of Economic and
yeah, OECD. Yeah, OECD publications. So you can say if you search OECD global value chains, I think you will get there. It's some of their reports. I can show you. I have one here.
This is all super interesting to me. I mean, and George, this might be to your question. I've been thinking about this recently.
Like this.
Yeah.
Like this.
That's wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah.
OECD is like one of the sources to explore in detail. So it's good to get some confirmation of the initial searches we've been doing.
Well, I think I'll draw this to one of Torben's earlier. So I'll just say this. I mean, I'm curious here. I've been just thinking about teaching. You think about, if you talking about basics of value chains and how much we get into these abstractions of, oh, there's suppliers and there's a firm and there's buyers, and we don't get into the complexity of the chain or the ecosystem. And the ability to just draw out some examples, I think, would be useful. But one of the comments I think I heard, Torben, when maybe this was Zhao's question about, what does it mean to, what's your advice as an editor for publishing? And I think what I heard you say were things like, understand what the state of the literature is, understand what your contribution is. And I think to come back and say, okay, the issue of global value chains is incredibly important, and we all accept that, but then understand with 2 or 3 prominent citations about the status of that literature. And it's not large scale empirical. I'm thinking, if I were to think about that, a lot of it's, early casework by Jan Rivkin, or in M&As, Ben Comas-Caceres always impresses me as somebody who's in the M&A space, come up with these qualitative case studies that are insightful. But I could imagine you have 2-3 citations in the global value chain space that are suggesting that our work really is case-based. And now that's the foundation or the platform or the hurdle, if you will, of which you have to, contribute beyond. And maybe that's, 2 industries, or, some sort of grid of industries that are more or less uncertain, more or less domestic, more or less integrated. And then we can, start drawing some qualitative differences across selected cases. And that might be sort of a next step. So a super cool question.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Again, I'm coming to the group because I think this is not about me, but about the group and your thoughts. But as we sort of wrap up our conversation today, is there things you would, and maybe give our participants one last chance to raise some questions? Are there things you would like to, state of the field, given all of your accomplishments today, what you'd like to see, what you'd urge us to think about, some sort of closing statements along those lines?
I think we have been touching on many of you can say the reflections I also have done over the years and things like that. Maybe one last thing I think you also mentioned, it's also this about being you can say being humble, but at the same time have the fire in the eyes. So it's you can say many things. It's you need to have the fire in the eyes in the sense that you want to do something, but at the same time being humble. So it's again finding the right balance that about these things. So I think it's for me it has very much being about trying to find these balances, and for example also this balance between, of course, really want something, have something on that you want to say to the world, and but also at the same time be humble, because there's a lot of fantastic researchers that have done great things already out there.
So we do have a last question coming in, last minute question. And this is from, well, it's from Jing Tang, but Jing, why don't you ask that in your words?
Yeah, I was thinking of unmute myself. Yeah. So thank you so much, Professor Torben. And my question is very simple, because I'm still a first-year PhD student at Granite and Purdue University. So what are the promising methodologies that can be applied to this field? So maybe there are some topics that we can revise in the later years using these new methodologies. So that is my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by promising methodologies. I was talking about digitalization and things like that. I don't know whether you have that in mind, because for me, methodologies or methods is very much the tools, so to say. So what kind of tools we use depends on what kind of problem we try to answer, so to say. I think for me, you can say our research problem is not so much driven by the methodologies. It's rather the other way around, that it's our research question that drives the methodologies. But maybe you understood what I said, this about that one of the new interesting things, this about digitalization, additive manufacturing, and I don't know, which is more a phenomenon that it's a methodology, so to say. I don't know.
I understand what you have said, but actually it's, so I am still in the first year, so I have taken so many classes, especially our program is a little bit econ based. So we took a lot of methodology classes from econ department. But honestly, when I read all the papers, I didn't know very much how to apply what I have learned from the classes to those topics that I have interest in. So it's kind of like the gap. I have no idea. So I have this question because in the previous talks, there are some scholars mentioning that machine learning is a quite popular methodology recently, and if you can learn something about machine learning or how to deal with the big data, that can be an advantage for you, no matter what kind of research topics probably in the near future you will have interest in. So I'm just kind of thinking if there are some general methodologies that probably if you learn right now and you will benefit from it in the near future. So that's kind of my general question. Yeah.
I would say, of course, it's good to know a lot of methodologies. Of course, you will have to be good at statistics and methods and things like that in order to be a good researcher. So you need to have a very good toolbox there. So it's a good investment to follow these courses, as you say, and learn these methods. Because it will be something you will be using many times during your career as you move on. but the question of whether there's one method that or some new methods that beat all the others, as you say a little bit, I'm skeptical. Of course, there's fashions here, or also as with everything else, and now people are talking about machine learning, and of course machine learning can be used to some things. I'm actually, in my mind, of course there might be different views here. For me, you can use machine learning to predict some events. But you cannot use machine learning to come up with causality and causal arguments. So for example, I'm working. That's another aspect, a little bit of me. I'm working a lot with companies. So I work with one company. It's a Norwegian company where a huge telecom company, they want to know their customers, who is actually churning of their customers. So they want to know which customers might be have a tendency to leave the company. So we have a lot of data on the different customers, so we can do machine learning there, and then we can come up with, and we can predict what is the risk of that this customer will actually leave the company, churn the company. And they want to know that because then they can start with all kind of rebate campaigns and offerings to that customers in order to try to keep that customer with the company. But we cannot use it to understand why the customer might want to leave. Here we have to come up with some with more causal model, because machine learning come up with very complicated algorithm they use to predict whether the customer leaves, so to say. So I think if you want to predict an event, you can do it with machine learning for me. But I think you have to. You come back to the old thing about more causal models if you want to say something theoretically of what's going on and test that. So I think it can be used for something, but I think it's an overstatement if you think that it's solution to every problem, machine learning.
Yeah, got you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can add. I mean, I think, I'm aware because of what the STR division. So let me first of all reiterate what I heard, or what I think I heard, and Torben will chastise me if I am wrong here, but I think I heard the method follows the research question. Okay. And I think that's sort of it's a truism, but it's important. The STR division has been working with the Academy journals to revise keywords that we will use. And we just had, I'm going to pull this file up, because we were looking this morning at new keywords, or last night, new keywords for the Academy journals. And some of those keywords pertain to methods and theories, and sort of we're trying to get things in alignment with what the STR division believes is important, and what maybe some of the other what the journals have historically focused on. So where is this email? 1 second. I just want to make sure I'm speaking accurately to you here. So we got an email from Laszlo Tahani last night with the revised AMJ keywords. And for research methods, they're adding in things like longitudinal methods and multi-methods, limit categorical discrete choice models, endogeneity correction, self-selection, event history, network analysis, QCA. So there's been, I think, if you're looking for what are some methods that are being discussed right now, those are top. Now, I would not distract from research question drives method, right? I also think I heard you say that you're at Purdue. So, I mean, you've got the opportunity to interact with Professor Schindel every now and then, I'm sure. So sort of, I think you would also see a lot, I think you would hear Dan talk a decent amount in a way similar to Torben about the importance of engaging with practice, the importance of thinking about what's distinctive about strategic management or international strategy or global strategy. Maybe it's not in West Lafayette interacting with lots of companies, but thinking about what are important problems, important phenomena, and then how you can develop causal arguments to address that, and then again, what's the method that's appropriate for that. So just, 2 cents.
Thank you so much.
Oh, well, so I think we've had a good conversation. I'm not seeing, I think we've exhausted sort of the questions I had prepared. I want to, I'll ask, if there's anything Torben wants to share, I'm willing to listen to him for hours on end and learn a little bit. We've got some images of everybody, but do we have any last questions? If not, I think we should all thank Professor Pedersen for his time. I am greatly appreciative of it, and I hope you are as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
There we go. I'm gonna use the reactions. That's right. Everybody else is using the much better reactions. I will clap as well. So you got that going for us. So let me take a snapshot with everybody's who stayed here with us, and the STR division will share this somewhere. I'm not sure where, but thank you. I learned from you guys, and I hope to see everyone in Philadelphia next year.
Exactly. Yeah.
If not before. So
thanks a lot. Very good questions. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.